expresar lo que es como jugador y lo que significa para Argentina.
The confetti was still falling at MetLife Stadium when the football world started talking, and this time, nobody was being diplomatic. Spain had just been crowned world champions. Ferran Torres had scored the goal that ended Argentina's dream of back-to-back titles. Emiliano Martinez had made 11 saves and still finished on the losing side. And somewhere on the grass in New Jersey, Lionel Messi sat alone in tears while the chaos his teammates had created played out around him. What followed in the hours and days after that final whistle was not the usual post-tournament conversation about tactics and golden boots and what the future holds for the competing nations. It was something considerably louder, considerably angrier, and considerably more serious than any World Cup final aftermath in recent memory. The football world had things to say, and for once, it said them directly. Before we get into every detail of what was said and by whom, subscribe right now because this channel has been covering this tournament from the first match to the last, and the conversation is not finished yet. The disciplinary verdicts are coming, and when they land, you need to be here for the breakdown. Start with what actually happened, because the reactions only make sense when you understand the specific conduct they were reacting to. After the final whistle, as Spain's players began celebrating, Nahuel Molina appeared to strike Rodri as the Spain captain jogged past him. Rodri stopped and confronted him. Nicolas Otamendi arrived and delivered a sustained verbal barrage. And then Leandro Paredes grabbed Eric Garcia by the throat, shoved him backward, and went after Gavi with Thiago Almada joining from the side. Argentina's assistant coach Roberto Ayala was caught on multiple cameras apparently striking Dani Olmo during the confrontation. Substitutes and coaching staff poured onto the pitch from both benches. Scaloni sprinted between groups trying to contain what had become, on the night of the World Cup final, a physical altercation broadcast to the largest television audience in the history of the sport. Argentina also turned their backs during Spain's trophy ceremony, a collective, visible snub delivered in front of 80,000 people at MetLife and hundreds of millions watching globally. And this came on top of the Falklands banner displayed after the semi-final over England, which FIFA had already opened an investigation into before the final had even been played. That is the full picture. Now listen to what the people who know this game said about it. Gary Neville was one of the first major voices to land on the specific word that framed the entire post-final conversation. He called Argentina's conduct a disgrace. And the reason that landed so heavily is the context in which he said it. Neville spent the same breath acknowledging his respect for Argentina's competitiveness, praising the fight they had shown across the tournament, acknowledging what Messi had carried this team through across 4 years of being world champions. He said clearly that he loves what Argentina bring to the sport as a footballing identity. And then he said what happened after the final whistle was a disgrace and openly questioned why referees had consistently allowed Argentina to operate at the edge of the laws across the entire tournament without meaningful consequence. When someone who respects you uses that word, it carries a different weight than when an opponent uses it. Neville was not looking for a reason to criticize Argentina. The conduct gave him one, and he did not pretend otherwise. Alan Shearer was more specific. He described Paredes throwing multiple physical strikes at opponents after the final whistle, and said plainly that there is simply no place for that anywhere in football. His point was not about the intensity of the rivalry or the rawness of the emotion or the difficulty of losing a World Cup final. His point was simpler and harder to argue with. Everyone in that stadium understood how much losing hurt. Everyone watching at home understood what it cost to reach a final and fall short. There is a way to lose, and Argentina in those final minutes refused to find it. Joe Hart needed 2 words: disgusting behavior. He added that Argentina could have no complaints whatsoever about the result, pointing to the match statistics that showed Spain had been the dominant team from the opening whistle. And while he could understand why Rodri eventually responded after 120 minutes of sustained provocation, he could not and did not defend what Argentina chose to do when the outcome was already decided, and the only thing remaining was how they chose to conduct themselves. Wayne Rooney watched Paredes continue long after Spain had already been crowned champions and called it embarrassing. He was specific about Paredes in particular, noting that he is a better player and a better professional than what he showed in those minutes, that the behavior was a choice made by someone who should have known better and chose not to exercise that knowledge when it mattered. These reactions matter not just because of who delivered them, but because of their consistency. 4 experienced, respected voices from different backgrounds and different national footballing cultures all arriving independently at the same assessment. This was not a cultural misunderstanding or a heated moment or the forgivable rawness of fresh defeat. This was conduct that crossed a line that professional football has drawn clearly and that everyone playing and watching the sport at this level understands. The Spanish response was measured and, in its restraint, more damaging to Argentina than any angry retaliation could have been. Rodri, speaking after the match, acknowledged the difficulty of what his team had been subjected to across 120 minutes and into the aftermath. He did not revel in Argentina's behavior or use it as an opportunity to attack. He simply noted that Spain had handled the occasion the way world champions should handle it, and that the contrast between the two sides after the final whistle was visible to everyone watching. His composure in that response, the absence of any desire to pile onto a team already being widely condemned, said more about Spain's character in that moment than any victory speech could have. Dani Olmo was, if anything, even more composed. Having apparently been struck by Argentina's assistant coach Roberto Ayala during the confrontation, Olmo said in his post-match interview that it did not matter in the end. That what was important was the values you convey to the outside world. That players are role models for generations of children, and that his focus was on what that responsibility required of him rather than on what had been done to him. It was a response that was almost too dignified for the situation, almost too calm, and that calmness made Argentina's conduct look even worse by comparison. Ayala eventually broke his silence, and his statement was the only one from the Argentine side that directly acknowledged what had happened. He said he had rushed in to separate his players, that things sometimes happen when your heart is racing, and that given his position, his behavior needed to be different regardless of what he had received in return. He promised to apologize to Olmo personally. It was an acknowledgement rather than a justification, and it stood in significant contrast to the silence on the same subject from the players at the center of the brawl. Because that silence from Paredes, Molina, Almada, and the other central figures has been its own form of statement. Paredes posted on social media about pride and love and the honor of representing Argentina. He called it the best Argentine squad in history. He made no reference to the throat grab on Garcia, the assault on Gavi, or the red card that appeared on FIFA's official systems during the brawl and then quietly disappeared before any action was taken. Fernandez posted about heartbreak and honor and the privilege of the shirt with no acknowledgement of the dismissal that left his teammates defending with 10 men for the entire 30 minutes of extra time. Romero, one of the players under active FIFA investigation for the Falklands banner, posted about hurt and determination and starting over. Beautiful messages, every one of them, and a collective, deafening silence on the conduct that now has FIFA's disciplinary prosecutor working through camera footage frame by frame. The public response has been unprecedented in scale. A petition demanding a replay of the World Cup final accumulated over 61,000 signatures within days of the match. Social media across multiple countries generated sustained calls for FIFA to impose meaningful individual bans rather than the institutional default of a modest fine and no player sanctions that the 2022 precedent established. The conversation about whether Argentina receives different treatment from FIFA than other nations, a conversation that had been building throughout the tournament through formal complaints from Egypt, Belgium, Brazil, and Iran about officiating decisions, found a new and very visible focal point in the post-final brawl and the vanishing red card. And FIFA is now running 2 simultaneous disciplinary investigations from the same tournament against the same federation. The post-final brawl under Article 36 of the Disciplinary Code with Molina, Paredes, Almada, and Ayala all reportedly under examination, and the Falklands banner investigation covering the semi-final celebration separately. 2 open cases, 1 tournament, 1 file that gets thicker every time a new camera angle surfaces. The question sitting underneath all of it, the one that connects every reaction from Neville and Shearer and Hart and Rooney to every petition signature and every social media post, is the same question that has followed FIFA's relationship with Argentina for years. What does accountability actually look like when it applies to the most commercially valuable and globally beloved team in the sport? After 2022, the punishment for lewd gestures, dressing room mockery, and media facility damage was a fine of approximately £18,000. No individual player touched. Pocket change for a federation that had just won the World Cup. The precedents for meaningful punishment exist. Rubiales banned for 3 years. Suarez banned for 4 months. The teeth are in the rulebook. Whether they are applied to Argentina with the same consistency they have been applied to others is the question FIFA's credibility now depends on answering correctly. Because the reactions from Neville, Shearer, Hart, Rooney, and the millions of people watching around the world were not primarily about Argentina losing a football match. They were about what losing revealed. A team that has spent 4 years as world champions, choosing in the worst moment of that tenure to fight the team that beat them rather than accept the result with the dignity the occasion demanded. Messi shook hands with every Spain player before leaving the pitch. Joe Hart noted it specifically as the one moment of genuine class Argentina produced after the final whistle. Yamal went straight to him to offer consolation. The greatest player the sport has produced was given a night he deserved better than and surrounded by teammates who made it considerably worse. That is what the football world reacted to, not the scoreline, not the tactics, not the single goal that separated them. The choice, made freely and visibly in front of the entire world, about how to behave when the result went against them. Neville called it a disgrace. Shearer said, no place for it. Hart said disgusting behavior. Rooney said embarrassing, and the world largely agreed. Now FIFA has to decide what that agreement is worth in disciplinary terms. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Should FIFA impose real individual bans this time, or does losing the final represent sufficient consequences? I read every single one. Subscribe, because when the disciplinary verdicts land, this channel will be here to break down every outcome the moment it is confirmed. Do not miss it.